If you're ready to stop building someone else's dream and start creating your own, join our free community, the Self-Directed Network, at acesmanagementinc.com/school. It's where people leaving their W-2s come together to build freedom, purpose, and momentum toward what's next. Welcome to Life After W-2. I'm your host, John Chan. After 17 years in corporate America, I made the leap to build my own business. It was messier than I thought it would be, but also full of valuable lessons I didn't know I needed. This show is about sharing shifts in mindset, pivots in strategy, and personal changes that come with pursuing financial freedom. You're not alone in this. We're all figuring it out, one step at a time. Welcome to Life After W-2. In today's episode, Jim McEleney takes us inside his journey into franchising. He talks about the misconceptions he started with, the consulting process that helped him understand what he really wanted, and the deep research that led him to the Supercuts system. If you have ever wondered how to evaluate franchise opportunities or whether your skills transfer into business ownership, this conversation will give you clarity and direction. Let's get into it. Jim, so glad to have you.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me here.
Of course. So tell us a little bit about what your life was like in corporate America.
Corporate life, the Wayback Machine. So I was in financial services, primarily in Boston. I was in that space for 28 years. Um, the majority of it, almost all of it, was with one single company that got acquired over time and changed our business cards and the title of what was on the door, but in essence, in the same business for all those years. Um, Company I was with moved me overseas. It was supposed to be a 3-year deal. It turned into 9. So I spent 7 years in London and 2 years in India. And that was all fantastic. But that was the last bit of my corporate life. But like many people, I would describe my corporate life as I was living by my calendar. I was driven by a day full of meetings. Especially, I think, as you get more senior, you end up in more and more meetings and not necessarily doing. And that was definitely the way I would describe my life. The good news is I was doing it in remote places for the last 9 years. So that was really energizing for me.
Yeah, I can't imagine living abroad for 9 years. I mean, it must have been a pretty cool experience.
It was great. It was only supposed to be 3. So I definitely overstayed my welcome.
So, I mean, you get these cool experiences where you get to see other countries, experience new things. Um, why did you decide to leave?
Well, what happened was, in 2015, I was making the decision that I was going to move back. And I probably had signaled that to the company about a year before that because we needed to be thinking about succession planning. Um, I threw a little bit of a curveball at them, though, because I said that my company, by the way, was a large US based financial institution, corporate headquarters. By the time I was moving back, because we had been acquired, was now in Lower Manhattan, New York City. And so the assumption was that when I was coming back, that I was going to be taking some job on some floor in corporate headquarters. Quite honestly, the company didn't have a mindset of remote work at senior levels at the time. And so even if I went back to Boston, what I was hearing from my peers was that they were shuttling down to New York on Monday morning. And if they were lucky, they were going home on Thursday night, maybe Friday. I didn't really want to do that. So, in addition to saying that I was going to be moving back, I said I was going to be leaving. And I will give them credit. They were incredibly supportive. There was nothing that ever felt like a blacklist or anything like that. But, you know, I shared my thoughts as to why I didn't want to stay. And honestly, it was probably as much about me as it was them. For me, I felt like I had done a lot of that. I'd seen that business probably in its best days, and those were behind us. Regulation had really put some heaviness into banking and financial services, quite honestly. Much of it deserved, but I just wasn't feeling it for myself. And I felt like I had another act. I was just hitting 50. So, and we were clear that we were going to be moving to Florida. So I knew that by moving back and coming to Florida, there really wasn't going to be a place for me in that company to continue, even though they would have had me. And it probably would have been fine, but I just needed to take a off ramp.
Right. Kind of an off tangent. question though. So, a friend of mine, he's Indian. He goes back in the summertime.
Hmm.
How different is it, the weather-wise, in India versus Tampa?
Well, I think it depends on where you are in India, right? I
Mm,
mean, there's plenty of places in India that you can point to that feel like Tampa, right? They can be really sticky during a few
mm,
months of the year. Mumbai has that, for example. I was about 3 hours in from Mumbai in a place called Pune, and it was more elevated, more mountainous around us. So, we had a more moderate climate, but we had a monsoon season, so we had a heavy rain season, but here I am in Tampa. We just sort of came off the back of ours, right? So
yeah,
I guess it's same thing, different place sometimes.
right. So then, what made you decide Florida? I mean, you spent all your U.S.-based life in the Northeast, so why Florida?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I never thought I was going to be a Florida person, quite honestly. And so I met my partner Matt while we were in London, an American. And when we were moving back, he grew up in the Midwest. He lived in the Northeast in several different places, and we kind of came back with the idea that we didn't want to step into the other one's life, meaning didn't want to return to where one of us came from before. And we really didn't. We were done with winter. So we sort of said, let's take a flyer on Florida, and we landed ourselves in St. Petersburg, which um, the chamber president loves to tell the story that we did all of our research, or almost all of our research, online to find St. Petersburg. So it's a great story about their website and social media and resources. But it's true. And we came down for a few days to check it out. But St. Petersburg is maybe one of the most un-Florida places in Florida. And I fell in love with it. So here we are.
Okay, interesting. What do you mean by one of the most un-Florida places in Florida?
It's got a really vibrant scene around. It's sort of this semi-urban place, right? And I always came from big cities, so the way I describe it to folks is I say it's big enough to get lost when you want to, and small enough to plug in where you choose to. It's about a quarter of a
Mm,
million people, and great art scene, great sports. Tampa Bay, you get four cities for the price of one, right? You get Clearwater, you get Tampa, you get St. Pete, and I throw in Sarasota there, and they're all really different. And
mm,
so, this area just gave us a lot of variety, and we've made great friendships. And I think one of the great things about Florida is that almost everybody is from somewhere else. So there's this natural curiosity about where are you from,
yeah,
and that starts conversations,
right.
and you build friendships off the back of just that one simple question: where are you from?
Yeah, I think just even in my neighborhood, everybody except one family is from somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. And it's great, right? We get to learn about all these other places and hear stories about how people grew up. And I
Mhm.
grew up in New York City, so my experience was very different than some of the people around me, for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So then you move back to, so you
Mm,
have the transition period, right? Where
yeah,
you tell the company, I'm no longer gonna be working, I'm gonna be moving to Florida.
right.
So then how do you plan your next steps?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I got 5 stars on this part, because I didn't, I knew we were moving to Florida, but I kind of parked it and said, I'll deal with that once we get to Florida. And, um, and even once I got to Florida, I probably spent a few months just settling in, right? Just getting ourselves settled. And, there's a lot of great things that can distract you here in terms of things to do. And I took full advantage of all of them for maybe about 3 or 4 months, right? But at
Mm,
some point, the mailman keeps bringing the bills, and you have to start thinking about what you're going to do next. And, I didn't have the bright idea. I did some networking in financial services down here, test the waters, but I wasn't really seeing a lot of opportunity, quite honestly, with the business background that I had. The businesses that I had been in weren't really represented down here, and there was something in the back of my head that said, "Don't go back to doing what you were doing." So I started thinking about, could I own my own business? That was always something that I had thought about. Could I be a small business owner? But the problem was I didn't have the bright idea. And frankly, if I had the bright idea, I'm not sure I have the risk profile to support the bright idea. So I started to look at different models of business ownership. I looked at franchise quite a bit, and I started studying the franchise model. And like a lot of people, I had misconceptions or misunderstandings about it. And I just couldn't believe how varied and dispersed and diverse it was in terms of industries. And I started looking at some of the owners and franchises, calling people, talking to them, and realizing that they had a pretty interesting lifestyle, something that looked more like what I was hoping for myself going forward. So I actually engaged as a candidate or client with a consulting group that I now happen to work for called FranNet. So I was a client 10 years ago. And I went through some of the same process of getting in touch with my goals, my motivations, my transferable skills. And I worked with a FranNet coach who suggested about 6 different business possibilities to me that she thought could match my business model. And I started my research on that. And along the way, from drawing lines through ones after going through franchise research and meeting with people and talking to franchisees and whatnot, I made a decision that I was going to jump into the Supercuts hair system. So you say, here's this guy with all this banking experience, and he goes into hair, right? But I wasn't going to be cutting hair. I wasn't going to be coloring hair. I wasn't qualified to do it anyway. But the role of an owner is very different than sometimes what the role of the business is for its customers and its clients. And Supercuts checked a lot of the boxes of the model that I had built for myself in terms of what I was looking for in a business. And so I made that investment. I actually did it in a somewhat non-traditional way. I bought existing salons rather than starting and planting flags for new ones. So I jumped on this moving train, right? I was having a ball on a Friday, and on Monday I had 35 stylists and 5 locations and all the fun that comes with that. And and I loved it. I mean, I there was just something about having my own business that was so liberating to the way I used to spend my days, quite honestly. And it doesn't mean every day was easy. In fact, I probably had more hard days running the salons than I did in banking because I was, in retrospect, I probably was a little bit on autopilot because I had done it so long. So I owned these salons, and that's another. I mean, happy to go there if you want to take me into any questions around that. But I owned them for 5 years. They were 2 hours south of me, so I did have a drive. I wasn't there every day, of course, but I learned a lot about what it is to be a small business owner, to have to make payroll, to cover rent. We had a few storms along the way, so I had the joy of looking at recovering some of that space. Not the big storms we've had over the last 2-3 years. I was out by then, but I really I'm a big fan of franchise. I consult. I basically do the same role as a coach that the person who helped me 10 years ago did. So I really loved FranNet. I really loved our culture, and here I am for the last 4.5 years, sitting on this side of the table, helping people the same way I was helped 10 years ago.
So it's so interesting that because when you think about buying businesses, at least with the people that I talk to, it's
Mm,
always you're buying these mom and pop shops, maybe businesses that don't necessarily have infrastructure to scale, and then you're coming
yeah,
in and you are adding all the systems. Basically bringing it to today's technology. But you went out and you bought, is it
yeah. I bought
five
five.
salons? Did
Mhm.
you buy that from one individual, or what did you do? How was that?
Yeah, it was. It was one individual. He was an out-of-state owner, right? So one of the attractive things about some franchise models is you can be, call it a semi-involved type of owner, and he was probably even less involved than that, quite honestly, based on um, what I understood from him, but also what I saw from and heard from the team once I had acquired the salons. But my role in a business like that was not to stand behind the desk in the salons. My job was to get out into the communities where we had these locations and to take care of marketing and bring more people in. I used to always say to our stylists, we do the marketing for you, but if you give a great experience, someone will be back to see you again. So that's how you build your client base. But my job was to be the outside guy, to build community relationships, to set a marketing strategy, and to invest in it that would bring more people to stop at our Supercuts.
Right. So then, I mean, again, when I think about building a business or think about going into business for myself, I
Mm,
picture going out and building it from the ground up.
yeah.
So franchises were never a thing that I thought I would do,
Okay. Yeah.
but I've just But the more I think about it, the more I feel like, well, if they're gonna handle a lot of the marketing, you have a brand that's already in place. They already have a proven system.
Mm.
Like, why
Well,
not, right?
why not? Yeah. Well, and there are some why nots, right? And I hear it
Mhm.
from people I work with today, right? Maybe they take objections to paying a royalty, 5%, 6%, whatever it is. Some people just want more control over their business than what a franchise is going to bring them. Whether that's good or not, I'll let them reserve judgment on that. But, I think, a lot of the people I talk to, especially in the last few years with sort of the uncertainty around the economy, they want to somehow lower their risk profile and their exposure. If they're going to make a jump or if they've been pushed out and they're thinking about what's next, they want to try to do it in a way that they think they can set themselves up for the most success possible. And I think franchising with good brands, can be that kind of a model, right? Because you pointed it out already, John. Right? Someone else has already made the mistakes. They've optimized the delivery model. You've got a brand that should be known, or you can help become further known in your market. And I'll say this as a guy that came out of a 65,000 person company when I was in corporate. I think I would have made a really crappy solopreneur if I had had that bright idea of my own. And there's a community in franchise, whether it's the support you get from your franchisor, or maybe more importantly, the support and resources you get by talking to your fellow franchisees. That is a substitute and maybe a little bit of a security blanket to what you used to know in big corporate, you know?
Yeah, I think that's been a tough transition for me. I didn't come from a large 65,000 employee company, but I was an employee.
Yeah.
And so a lot of things that I didn't have to do. But now
Yeah.
being a business owner, I have to do everything.
Yep. The same departments inside the bank that I used to curse for waiting for things, I suddenly became that department when it was time for IT or marketing or HR or whatever,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
What's the saying about that? That doesn't kill you, makes you stronger,
Right.
right?
Definitely learned a lot of lessons, but I think franchising, just thinking about it seems like it could be a good step for a lot of people who want to get into business but don't have any experience and have some money to invest as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's more. I think a lot of people go straight to food. They think franchise, they think food, and
Mhm.
food's a great industry, but it's only one industry. I have actually, I've been doing this 4 years. I've placed a lot of people. I have not placed a single person into a food brand. It just hasn't been their model. You know,
Well, I see food as problematic because you have waste.
you have waste. It's a lot of staffing, right?
Mhm.
It's long
Yeah.
hours. I mean, I respect the people who do it, but I mean, if people are coming out of corporate with a vision for how they want to sort of reset their life, I'm not sure. I haven't found a lot of restaurant owners, especially in the early days, who can point to that being um, the silver bullet.
Yeah. So what are the top 5 misconceptions about franchise that you're seeing when you have these conversations?
Yeah, some of it we've already talked about, right? I mean, this myth that you have to have experience in the business, right?
Mhm.
That's franchisors. They want to understand what your business experience has been and how you're going to fit into their system. They will teach you the rest. They will teach you the call it the more technical side or the specifics that you need to know about that business. That's what you're paying them for, quite honestly. So you'd
Right.
be crazy to not take their lead. So I think experience is definitely one. I think people think it's because they associate it with the Golden Arches. People immediately think that it's millions and millions of dollars. I'm working with someone right now where I think her buy-in cost for the franchise she's likely to go to is going to be about $90,000. So I mean, just a different scale and much more affordable than what people realize. And also people think they have to have that money under their mattress. There's ways to fund an investment in franchise, and that's part of what we do is help people get to the right folks for funding resources as well and funding advice. Um, other myths. I think just industries in general, right? There's a lot more industries out there than people realize. I think franchising last stat I saw was that it touches about 72 different industry sectors. So, think about that. There's probably something in there for everyone if they really did want to jump in and own a business.
Yeah.
So those are just a few of the things that I think about.
So being in a market where right now where I live, growing rapidly. I mean,
Mm,
I my car is actually in the shop right now because there's so much construction going on that this is the sixth nail that I've had in my tire uh,
yes.
in the 2 years that I've been here, right? Um, and so, is it a better idea to open a franchise in a growing market like that, or maybe something that's more established, like where I used to live in the DC metro area?
Well, I think I don't think either one's bad. I think you just have to know what you're getting into, right? So, sometimes I have people that they start to zero in on a brand, and then they do a little bit of market research about competition, and they come back to me and they say, wow, I didn't realize there's going to be a lot of competition for this in my market. Um, and so my view on competition is, well, that usually means there's demand. So
Mm.
now you've got to ask yourself the question as to whether you think you can outperform and provide a different level of service and different experience for the customer, maybe than what they're getting from those competitors that are around. So, I think that's one way to think about crowded market. I think where I'm living now, which is just south of St. Pete in Palmetto, I think this would be a little bit of a longer term play for someone to be establishing down here. But the opportunity is that as this area continues to develop and build out, you're going to be the answer that people will know because you're around. But that might take a different, it might take a different tolerance for how fast that business will grow for someone making that investment, right? So, and I've seen people do that, right? They're in it for the long haul. They're thinking about what the community might look like in 2 or 3 years, as opposed to what it looks like today. So, like I said, neither one's a bad move. It's just they come with different trade offs, I think.
Yeah, I think competition is always one of the biggest deterrents, but it doesn't mean it might not always be a bad thing.
I think in this day and age where everyone goes to Google reviews and everything, right? I actually think competition creates opportunity. If you've got a business that performs well, chances are you're going to score higher than the some of the other businesses around you. So by default, people get led to you because their feedback they're getting from the marketplace is that you've got a good thing here relative to some of the others. So I embrace competition quite honestly because I think it can. If you're up for running a good business, competition is okay.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Just outperform, work harder, outperform your competition, do better,
Hmm.
provide a better service.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I guess going out and why did you buy five instead of just one salons?
Yeah. Well, I think some of it was, you know, I think I mentioned that I was 50 years old when I left banking, right? So part of it was sort of my own timeline, right? Um, so I don't, I wouldn't have bought five if I was starting from scratch. But the fact that I had this opportunity to buy existing stores off of this one owner made it attractive. And I didn't have to go through, some of the heavy lifting of site selection and lease negotiation and build out and everything else, right?
Mhm.
So in my case, it was, five was attractive from that standpoint, the ability to kind of hit the ground running and go. I also think, um, looking at the unit economics of salons for what were my financial goals, one salon for me wasn't going to do it. So, that was another reason why I was looking at five. I remember I was thinking income replacement, not income supplement. Right, I had left my job, and I had resources, but I also I didn't want to draw on those fully, so I needed something that I knew was that I thought could turn profitable pretty quickly for me.
Gotcha. It makes sense. Um, so, I mean, what are some of the toughest lessons you've learned from running those
Yeah.
salons?
Well, if we stay on the profit theme, is that that your timeline, the timeline you build and the way you model things out isn't always the way it's going to happen.
Mhm.
I bought underperforming stores, quite honestly. they were not up to even the median in the Supercut system. I had an out-of-state owner that, I don't think he was really spending the time to grow that business. So, you know, um, I realized that doing what I set out to do, which is to grow it, is not something I can do on my own. I was dependent on the team, of course, and the experience that the team was delivering for the customer. It took me longer to get my repeat customer percentages up to where I was hoping to get them to, and I didn't get them to all the salons by the time I got out. So, you recognize, like any business, right? You recognize that you're the owner, but the delivery is through others. And so, you have to create an environment and a culture and provide the training and the tools. And you have to do that with people who match you with the right attitude and who want to learn and who want to deliver. And I didn't always have that. I mean, I turned over more than half of that team in the first 9 months that I had the stores because they just weren't showing me that they were going to come along for the ride. And you know what? It's not, it's nothing against them. It's just we weren't a match for each other. They worked fine in the old model, but the old model wasn't making money. So
Right.
that was a lesson. Um, I think, the point I made before about lean on your peers is important. You talk to a lot of independent mom and pop business owners and they talk about how lonely it can be. I had the benefit of having a community of peers, maybe peers who had to make and stare down some of the decisions I was making in my business. And I leaned on them a lot. There were a few of them that were sort of on the other side of the bat phone for me, and that I could call them and I could sort of talk through what I was thinking about or the options I thought I had, and they would relate to it and maybe share what they did. So that community of others, and don't go it alone, right? And for independent business owners, I think things like chambers and industry associations can be great places to form that community if you don't have it within something like a franchise. But you know, surround yourself with people who are, like-minded and who are doing the same thing you're doing. You'll grow your business and you'll make better decisions.
Yeah, it's one of the recurring themes that I've heard from people is just whoever's in your network, who are the people around you, you want to surround yourself with the same type of people. People are doing that with doing what is it you want to do and doing
Yeah,
it well. I mean, it just shortens the learning curve.
yeah, yeah. And it's a lot of trial and error, right? I mean, you meet a lot of people to figure out who those few
Yeah.
nuggets are.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure that going from corporate to then owning five salons was a big shift in a lot of different ways. What's the one of the biggest mindset changes you've had to overcome just actually do it?
I think you have to. If you think about my employee team and whether it be my stylist or my managers who were working managers, meaning they cut behind the chair as well as manage the rest of the team in their salon. I think you have to. It took me a while to sort of recognize where people were starting from, and not everyone was starting from where I started from. So um, I'll give you an example. Um, every month after we closed the books, I had a managers meeting. First week of the month, I had all the numbers. We would hole up in a like a one of those Regis office space type places. I would pay for a few hours of conference room time, and these five managers would come to a meeting with me. Well, the idea of coming to a meeting and not being in their salon was so foreign to them, right? And
Mm.
the first couple of meetings, they probably would have said, "Oh my God, these are so dry. Like, what are we doing?" Because we were going over numbers and we were talking about performance, and I wasn't going to apologize on any of that, but I did realize a couple of meetings in that I got to sprinkle some fun into this for these folks too, right? They're wired. Cosmetologists are wired to be pleasers, right? If you think about
Mm.
it, they are in the business of making people look and feel good.
Mm.
That's where their passion comes from. And so I had to sort of recognize that and flex a bit on my side as well. So, we would do some things, every kind of third month, the meeting might be a little shorter and we would get out and maybe go for some food together. Or one day we went to one of those, painting places where we all painted the same thing, so that's I evolved. How's that?
Changing the ways to kind of fit who your
Yeah,
audience
yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And realize, I mean, I came out of a, financial services, right? I came out of a world of capitalists where, incentive bonuses, monetary bonuses were what mattered to people. And what I realized a few months in with Supercuts, even though we did create a financial incentive system, is that wasn't the real way. I mean, it was important to my team, but what was more
Mm.
important was maybe getting called up in a group meeting that we would do every 6 months, all of us, and have someone receive an award, maybe for something that they did in terms of the way they grew their customer base, or ticket averages that they had, or whatever it was, right? And that meant more to them. And bringing that home, a lot of these folks, to I had a lot of single parents, right? So bringing home an award from work and showing it to their kids really, really mattered to them, because they were beating themselves up for the fact that they weren't with their families as much as they would like to, and that they were maybe the sole adult in the house.
Right.
So, those things, I learned those. They weren't intuitive to me on day one, or even on not even in year one, really.
Got it. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. What about some advice? What's some advice? Knowing what you know now, what's some advice you would have given to yourself when you stepped foot on Florida soil?
Yeah. Um, I think, I mean, I definitely, in hindsight, I probably should have I probably should have broken away earlier, except I think what saved me and kept me doing what I was doing for as long as I did it was the fact that I had that overseas experience. Um, if I'm being honest with myself, even by the time I was finishing up my time in Boston before I relocated, I was sort of at the tail end of things, and moving sort of gave me new energy and new focus, and it carried me for those, turned out 9 years. So I would say that, definitely, if you're curious about something, I say this a lot to the people I work with. You're not making a decision on meeting one or even meeting six. What you're doing is you're trying to build a knowledge base to help you make a decision. And I think if you don't make it as big and hairy and audacious as, oh my God, this might be a change. Just be open to the possibilities, right? And go through, listen to yourself, and maybe just explore. Um, there's people I work with today that today isn't going to be the right time for them, but I give them credit for at least taking the time to try to learn something about franchise. Maybe it's something they'll park away for some day down the road. Maybe it's something never, or maybe it will take them in a completely different direction, right? But
Yeah.
I like to think that people, from the experience of doing the research they can do with me, they learn more about themselves than maybe they knew coming into it.
Yeah, it never hurts to just have a conversation because I'm always curious about franchise as well. Because again, it's most of it's done for you. You don't have to figure a ton out. It's just the people managing it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, there's a lot in the execution for sure, but having a setup system and having a playbook,
Yeah.
I think it definitely increases your chance, accelerates your chances for success and growth, and lowers your risk. But people come to me and say, "Oh, I'd love to, can you show me a business that I can put maybe 10 hours a month against?" And I say, if you find it, let me know, because I'll probably be sitting in line behind you. But I have not seen that. That was not my experience.
Yeah, I think it's one of those misconceptions is as a business owner, you kind of set it and forget it. I don't think that's how it
Just add,
works.
yeah, just add water, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nope,
Well,
nope.
Jim, it's been a lot of fun hearing your story. How can you help people and how can people reach out to you?
Well, I'm available through FranNet. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, right? So Jim McEleney on LinkedIn. I also have some content out on FranNet's site. If someone just wants to book time just to kick around what they're thinking about, I'm at that stage of life where I'm very happy to just be an ear and try to help some people. That's how I'm wired. So if there's something I could be doing to help people, if they want to learn more, um, absolutely. Or if they find themselves around someone in maybe their own work environment or family or friends that is at some sort of an inflection point around change, and they just want to maybe just use the conversation with me as a thought starter to help them just get out of the gate, happy to do it. If they want to
Very
learn more about franchise, I'm their guy.
Okay, very cool. So what we'll do is make sure we'll have all those links in the description just to make life easier for everyone.
Okay.
And yeah, Jim, thank you again for coming on and sharing your
Yeah,
story.
and thanks for doing this, John. I think it's a great theme you have going here for people. There's not enough resource around this, so well done, you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, have a good one.
You too. That's it for today's episode of Life After W2. I'm John Chan, and I appreciate you tuning in. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who's ready to take control of their financial future. And if you're curious about how self-directed retirement accounts can unlock opportunities in alternative investing, grab our free guide. It's packed with insights to help you get started. The link's in the description. See you next time.